Welcome, everyone. My name is Jeff Kiley. I'm with the New York Press Service. And today we have our latest seminar, which is designed to help you make better decisions on the future of your business. Today, our webinar theme is Making Journalism Profitable. I'm pleased to welcome Chad Hussain from Quintype. Chad was at our conference last year. You may remember him. Hopefully, he'll be joining us again in 2025. But anyway, Chad runs the international partnerships with Quintype, and he spends his life speaking to publishers from around the world. He's going to share some interesting perspectives and some examples from different parts of the world, as well as give us some tech tips and insights. If you could, please hold all of your questions to the end, or better yet, if you want to put them into the chat, we'll try to get to all of them if we can. Let me get started by welcoming Chad. And I'm going to start off by asking a question, Chad, and where do you see revenue coming from local publishers in other markets?
Hi, Jeff. How are you? Nice to chat to you again. Obviously coming from sunny England at the moment. So, yeah, local news publishers. I'll give a perspective from around the world first. I think news publishing challenges seem to be global. I don't think they're different whether you're in the US or whether you're in China or whether you're in Singapore. I think they seem to be the same. And we're seeing pretty much advertising at best is flat. Okay, at best is flat. Most of them are seeing some kind of decline. Some of them have got really strong offerings. Some publishers, news publishers, got strong offerings, and maybe they're slightly above that. But that's the first thing I think that we're seeing. Simultaneously, the publishers certainly that we're working with, their audience is growing as well. So you're getting this scenario where your audience is growing, it doesn't necessarily translate into more revenue. So there is a shift, and it's been going on, I think, aggressively in the last 12 months, but possibly, people have been talking about it for much longer. And that is to a more reliable business model. And that really leads you to kind of one area if you're a news publisher, and that's really a direct to reader business model, or a direct to consumer business model, readers being your consumers. And that really leads you to reader revenue. And I kind of make that distinction by calling it reader revenue, Jeff, rather than purely subscriptions, because there's actually a lot more to reader revenue than just putting a paywall up and seeing what happens. Arguably, and it is arguably, everybody wants a subscriber, but it's also very hard to acquire. And I think there's enough, Premier League publishers out there with public case studies in terms of how long it's taken them to generate these subscribers. I think what's important for local news publishers around the world is start this journey of how they're going to deploy a direct to reader business model.
All right. So now, Chad, that brings up the question that as publishers pivot from advertising to reader revenue, we're seeing a shift in how content value is measured. And what should publishers be focusing on in that area?
Okay, that's an interesting, in terms of what their focus is. Let's kind of look at it from a first principles perspective. And what I mean by that is, readers are customers. Readers are your customers, your first customers, not the sponsors or not advertisers. Readers as your first customers, and I'll unpack that in a certain way, because you'll be saying, well, obviously they are, or maybe that's always been the case. For a large number of years, at least 2 decades, we've been optimizing for page views. So ad-funded models that don't necessarily take into account what the reader is doing. So a reader that's checking the weather is no more valuable than someone who's reading your lead article in terms of a pure page view. And I'd say that's actually unhealthy for some publishers, as they've kind of shifted to this kind of model where we'll increase page views at almost any cost. And it's kind of losing what the brand is actually standing for. So the quality of the reader's experience is not necessarily primary. And if that's the case, there's very little chance they're going to start paying for content if their experience is actually quite poor. So what does it mean when I say if you need to optimize for readers? Well, you're interested in the reader experience. You're interested in reader engagement. You're interested in if they're prepared to register as a reader for a better experience or an enhanced experience. You're interested in readers that come and return for your content, that are prepared to pay for your content directly and eventually subscribe. Now, this immediately changes the paradigm. If you're not optimizing just for a page view, you're actually optimizing for a reader's experience. It starts to change things in terms of how you look at your own product. Now, this isn't new. Me and you are old enough, I think, Jeff, to realize this isn't new. Since the dawn of the Gutenberg press, this is how we did it. You essentially, for the largest part of the 19th and 20th century, we had a business model where we created news, we created stories, and we sold them to readers. We're going full circle. We have to go full circle when it comes to digital. And what we mean by that is we want to create a digital product that is multimedia. It's a multimedia experience, but the reader's experience will become the most valuable commodity.
I see. Very interesting. So now, what technical changes would a publisher have to make to move to the model you're speaking of?
Okay, I'll try and be non-technical as such,
Yeah.
but I'll kind of guide you through some of the things that need to change. Okay, the way that you tell a story has become very, very important. You know, if you're optimizing for engagement and not purely just volume or performance, you have to look at creating content as a publisher for a digitally native reader or a more digitally native reader. And what that looks like is it's fast loading, it's multimedia, it's mobile, it's live, it's breaking. Content can start as a bite-sized piece of information, and invariably it can become immersive. Let me give you an example, and it's a global example, but it's quite an interesting example. By the end of 2024, 4 billion people will be eligible to vote in almost 60 countries. I don't think it's ever happened, ever before, that many people are eligible to vote in one single year. And that's an awful lot of election data. It impacts an awful lot of people's lives. So visualizing election data or large quantities of data is very easily done. You know, there's companies like Data Wrapper, Flourish, Google Data Studio. There's tools that will allow you to simply create that data, which used to be just a number, and embed that into your story. And now all of a sudden, with almost no effort, election tracking is now real time. It's immersive, it's efficient, it's mobile first, it's a visual story, and it encourages you to go back. You know, visual stories have enabled ubiquitous news consumption. You can check what's happening in the local election before you go into a meeting. If you go to the bathroom, if you're on a train, it doesn't matter. And as you're seeing that as a visual story, you can see, well, okay, this person's in the lead, all right? And you go back to that story a little bit later. So we're seeing this kind of merging of, it's a story, it's content creation, but it's also a visual experience. It's a reader experience. And so for local news providers, for something like election data, it's mastering those elements. It's a linear story, it's mobile first storytelling, and above all else, it's a visual story. The entry point has shifted. It doesn't have to be a headline anymore, Jeff. It can equally be a visual entry point into a story. That's not to say that the headline's gone by any stretch of the imagination. It's just saying it doesn't have to be the first choice. If you're looking at a Gen Z or a millennial reader, they're not necessarily going to respond any better to a headline than they would if they went through with a visual story that enabled them to say, listen, I'm interested in this.
So obviously, um, having today's readers be immersive as opposed to a print product. What? Give me some other examples of how you do that. I know you just
Okay.
spoke of some, but are there some others?
Yeah, I think, listen, if you're creating immersive stories or you're listen, telling better stories is one way of saying it. I'm saying that you're not necessarily telling better stories, you're telling the same stories in a different way. Excuse me. Content quality is very, very important. The expectations of your readers have evolved towards, listen, say, I want an immersive story. I want a well-researched story. I want an impactful story. Um, if you're able to do that, then you're going to provide deeper insights that resonate more. If they resonate more, they elevate engagement and they elevate trust in your brand. That's what people are prepared to pay for. Linear stories, because most of this is going to be consumed on a mobile. Linear stories is basically vertical moments. Okay, so mobile audiences will prefer shorter, digestible, vertical content that's pretty much delivering a narrative. It's not just one long story, it's vertical storytelling, which is bite-sized chunks of different stories. That helps build engagement for limited attention spans. People aren't buying a paper and they're sitting back and they're reading that paper from beginning to end. They're catching up on a news story. And that's that ubiquitous component. You've got to create the same content for someone that's going to be consuming it on a mobile. And when we talk about mobile storytelling, we're basically saying it's mobile first. Your primary medium of news consumption is going to be the mobile consumer. So you optimize for that. You have shorter articles, you have vertical video, you're trying to push that story as maybe as a bite-sized piece of content in the morning, and maybe by the afternoon, it's a much larger immersive piece of content. Visual storytelling, I've told you before, like the example with the elections, you're visualizing a piece of data, but audiences respond to rich visual components. Now, whether that's data visualization or infographic or video, integrating visuals into journalism or prioritizing visual storytelling into journalism is going to enhance not just comprehension, it also boosts your social shareability as well. All right. And that's another key important moment. If you're going to get clients who are going to be paying for your content, they value what you're doing and they're sharing it with their friends and with their family because it's important to them. Okay. Finally, if I'm saying telling better stories, we have to acknowledge that digital native audiences, the oldest millennials, Jeff, they're over 40. Okay, they're almost completely digitally native. Gen Z is completely digitally native. Millennials are almost. Even Gen X have adopted digital so far that they're hardwired to consume content in a certain way. And I think what this means is that content's now got to be bite-sized, it's got to be interactive, it's got to be personalized, and it's got to be linear.
All right. So let's change gears just a little bit here. Talk about paywall strategies, metered paywall, membership approach, I guess, and any others.
Yeah, okay. So I suppose everybody's aware of like the hard paywall, right? That's been around for a while. And I think when we look around the world, and I look in different markets, whether it's let's say a more mature market like the UK, or we look at more emerging markets such as the Middle East or whatever, we're seeing all of these approaches, metering, hard, soft, sections, premium, content only. The majority of news publishers, for example, are settling on creating a reliable funnel. I've actually got an example that I want to kind of raise with you, Jeff. It's quite an interesting example from India. It's an example where we've seen a publisher that had a commercial gain in less than 6 months of over 1,000%, which is insane, right? We're in the news publishing business, and if you're in single digit decline, it's like, oh, it's not that bad. But if you're in a space where there's 1,000% growth commercially, something's changed. Something's happened. And this publisher that I'm talking about is not new to reader revenue. It's not the first time they've deployed it. They've been in this space for at least a decade, and they're a serious news organization. Okay. The first thing that they did that made a change, Jeff, was they created a bundled offer. Okay. And I'm going to remind people of this. They created a bundled offer with another publisher, a bigger title, okay, in terms of their total audience. They immediately increased their reach. Okay. And that's quite profound. The bundled partner immediately got quality. So it was a symbiotic relationship here. But immediately, the first change is you've got reach. The second change is they thought they would run campaigns to fundraise investigative journalism. And this was the year of the Indian election. All right. So it's a big thing in India. Nearly 1 billion people go out and vote. And readers were interested in things like politicians, policies, ties by various corporate entities to politicians. Those campaigns were open to not just non-subscribers, they were open to subscribers as well. So this is how it works, just to visualize it. They would ask their readers to contribute to a story. Okay, ask them to listen. Do you want to imagine crowdfunding, Jeff, for a news site? That's basically how they were doing it, saying, listen, we are prepared to investigate this if we raise these many funds. Once that piece has been written, it's shared amongst everyone who contributed towards that particular article 2 weeks before anybody else had access to it. All right. Now, what happened? The bundling gave them reach. There's a key moment happening in India, such as, let me just get a drink of water, such as this is the Indian elections. And if you imagine February being a normal month for them, Jeff, meaning that it was a typical month in the last 12 months, no changes. By March, they'd done 150%. Okay. By April, they'd done 300%. By May, they'd done 600% of their baseline in February, which is a typical month. And by June, when the Indian election was over, they'd done 1,000%. Okay. It's just phenomenal turnaround in terms of revenue. And so just to recap that, bundling works. Okay. This is a very good example of where bundling works, or collaboration, whatever you want to call it. Asking your readers to directly fund your stories works. Big events matter. Big events that affect a town matter. I mean, there's so many things that I think, from a US context, what's happening in Western North Carolina is a local story. It matters. It's a big event. What's happening maybe on the southern border is a big event. And you've got to take that reader-centric approach. Put the reader at the center, understand exactly what your readers want, and deliver to them the content that they're prepared to pay for. If you know your readers really well, then that suddenly becomes apparent that you want us to do this, let's start fundraising. And you get these phenomenal results. I've never seen a result like that, to be honest, in all the time I've been doing it, where you get 1,000% increase commercially. It's almost unheard of in the space that we're in.
I see. So now, what about emerging trends in the short term? Maybe a year and a half, something like that. What's the steps people can walk away from today and get moving on, if that makes sense?
Yeah, listen, I'll split that into two parts. I think listen, let's give them. I'll give them some advice. The first and most important bit is that if you're a digital publisher, I don't think, excuse me, I don't think ad revenue is necessarily going to hockey stick anytime soon. At best, I think it being a steady decline, and that may be robust for some publishers, but overall, if you look at digital publishing overall, the yield is going down. It's been going down for many years. You need to take a diversified revenue approach. And that may be looking at, well, listen, we need a direct to reader business model because that represents something that's quite stable for us as a business. And we get to understand exactly what our readers are interested in. The most common thing I'm seeing happening around the world is developing a funnel, Jeff. Okay. And what I mean by a funnel is if you took 100% of your readers now and you put them into different buckets, the various buckets would be anonymous. How many of my readers come to my website and leave and I don't know anything about them? Okay, how many of my readers are anonymous to me? How many of my readers are registered or identified? Okay, how many of them give me a persistent ID like an email address or a phone number and they register so I know exactly who they are? How many of my readers are paying? It doesn't matter what they're paying, how many of them in that bucket are actually paying. And then the last couple are also quite interesting. How many subscribers do I have? Because you may have print subscribers. You may have a print and a digital offering. So how many of our readers on our digital entity are subscribing? And then finally, if you're already in this space, how many of your readers are advocating, as in they're already subscribing, but have you ever asked them for something extra? Have you ever presented them with something extra? That funnel is arguably the most important thing that a publisher can do post even this call, that they can start to understand what their readership funnel looks like and then understand where they want it to be. Because once you start saying, listen, that's where we are today, we have almost no digital subscribers, we have no one paying for content, 60-70% of our even more is anonymous to us. What do we want that to look like in 2 years? What do we want to look like in 5 years? Because once you've decided that, you start coming backwards and then you can wrap commercial, editorial, operations all around this goal to say this is where we want to be. This is what is going to put us in a good position in terms of developing a direct to reader business model. And those are the important things. When it comes to future trends, I think there's future trends that I see within tech. There's future trends I see within the publishing business. So the first one, I think, Jeff, in terms of the publishing business, AI is going to play a major role. It's going to play a sizable role in you as a publishing business, less so in the publishing content. It was always the big scare. And I think synthetic content and synthetic stories is less going to be what AI is going to be about. It's more going to be about AI being used as a publisher to help them discover content, help them with the visualization of certain ideas, certain bits of content, maybe building their front end website using a low code solution, maybe in translating their content in a different language. I'll cover a couple more for you, Jeff. So let me cover a couple more because I think I've got a couple of areas that I think also worth expanding upon.
Okay.
Local news is not going to disappear, and if it changes now, it has to change now. If it doesn't change now, then the chances are it will disappear. It has to change, but I'll explain why I think it's not going to disappear. There's basically a 5th generation warfare happening at the moment. There's an information war, and it has been going on for some time. And information is weaponized, and it's weaponized through misinformation and disinformation. And even as much governments around the world are involved in this. Trusted news and trusted sources of news is incredibly important. The people who live and work in a community are amongst the most trusted source of news anywhere in the world. Way, way, way more than social, way more than national news. Local news providers are amongst the most trusted sources around the world. If you change your product to becoming a more digitally native product, you've already got the trust. If you adapt your business model to get the people that you're serving to fund your news entity, your news platform, that's going to start moving you into a different space.
Great. Chad, we got a couple questions here if you have time for them.
Yeah, sure.
First one is how to improve reader revenue on the geo where readers are not yet ready to pay for subscription.
Okay, well, they're not ready to pay for subscription. Don't offer them a subscription. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't offer them a subscription. And how do you know they're not ready? It's an interesting question. Have you asked them that would they pay for content? Because we're almost in a subscription economy right now. We're in a place where if you want something, it's an outcome-based world. I want that movie. I don't want anything else. I'll pay for that movie. I don't want to pay for much more than that movie. Those things are happening right now. The ones that are doing it successfully, I see around the world, is they understand exactly what their readers want. Let's bring it to what happened with the hurricanes. There was a lot of question marks when I was in the US about the federal response. There was a lot of question marks about the federal response. If you say to your readers, would you like us to investigate the federal response in this town with regards to what happened with the hurricane, I think you're going to get a response. You're going to get people say, listen, yes, we want you to investigate it, and ask them, in order for us to do that, we need to fund it. We need to fund the journalism. And you pose that question to them, I'd be very interested to see what their reaction is going to be. Because you're going to get people who are not subscribers saying, I've had a disaster. My farm has been ruined. I want to know what's going on, and I'm prepared to give you $5, $10, whatever it is, to get this article off the ground so that we can have a voice where we feel voiceless. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm saying. Don't go for a subscriber off the bat. Go for developing a funnel. You know what a subscriber is going to do. Look at the New York Times. Look at the Washington Post. Look at the Boston Globe. You know how long it takes to generate these subscribers. It's published information. It's very, very available. Arguably, we all want subscribers, but prior to that, we need to develop the product, get a relationship with the readers, become very reader-centric, and then go down a path of saying, listen, were you prepared to pay for this? It's a single article. If you are, then I think that might change the paradigm.
Great. Okay. Another question. When you say linear, what does that mean to you?
Okay. A linear story is you're essentially writing a vertical story. And it's a vertical story of moments. It's not a headline, one image, a whole load of text. If you're still doing that, the majority of your audience is reading that story on their mobile device. Okay? That's the bit that needs to change. It's a multimedia experience. It's a collection. It's bite-sized bits of content. And it doesn't have to start with a headline. It could even start with a graphic. And if you're doing election coverage, it could be Chad's in the lead, you know, and it's a graphic and it's real time and it's being updated. That leads you into the story, and it's immersive. You're interacting with it. The next bit, what does this mean? Okay. And then you can have social commentary, and then you can have video, and then you can have multiple pictures in there, and then you can have more text. It's moments of a story. And the reason it is because news consumption is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's in every moment. 5 minutes before this call, Jeff, you could be checking on the news. You're not going to sit back and read the paper and relax into a story. It's like I've caught a minute of the news. And news publishers have to change to how people are consuming content. They're hardwired to consume this content in these bite-sized moments. If you look at the collective reach of Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, X or formerly Twitter, Facebook. It's about moments. If you're interested to go further, you'll go further. Or you'll save that and you'll say, listen, I want to read that a little bit later. It's so vital. That's not to say long form articles are dead. They're not. I'm just saying mix it up. So you're telling vertical stories, because the majority of your audience, I guarantee, is going to be consuming your content on mobile, not desktop.
Okay, Chad, next one is, what if there is no such culture in the country so far? For example, to pay for any content, how to start a subscription model in that case.
Okay, and the country I'm presuming we're talking about is the US.
Yeah.
Or is it international? Is this person referring to the US, or they're saying in their country?
The
they don't
US.
have in the
The
US.
US. Yeah.
By far and away, it's the biggest in the world. And more people are paying for content in the US than anywhere else in the world, hands down. It's got the most number of subscribers for any content, hands down, and they're pioneers in the world in terms of paying for content. And a rising tide will raise all boats. I mean another country. Okay, so we're talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay, we're meaning another country. So there isn't
Yeah.
a culture of paying for content. Okay, if there's no culture for paying for content globally, there is an appetite to say, listen, at some point, you would pay for news. At some point, if that really matters to you, you're going to pay for it. The first thing I would do is set your funnel out. Like I explained, anonymous, identified, paying, subscribing. Set your funnel out where you are today and where you want to be. Look at your product. Are you optimizing for page views, or are you optimizing for a reader-centric business? If you're optimizing just for a page view, meaning a page view is no more valuable if they're reading, a currency converter as they are reading their lead article, you've got to change it into a reader-centric approach. Then you need to understand exactly what's important to your readers. Arguably, if you are local news, that's your most valuable thing. You know that what matters to those people is things that impact upon their life. Engage with them, understand what it is that would make them say, listen, I'm prepared to contribute. And there are some models that I advocate. One of the models is not subscription. One of the models that I advocate is a contribution. If you said to me as a local business owner, I mean, I live in various places around the world, but when I'm home, I'm in England, and I'm in a small town in the north of England. If they said to me, in order to keep the local newspaper alive, we're asking for contributions, I would say, yeah, I want to keep it alive. I'm prepared to give you X amount of money. My daughter wants it to be alive as well. And she was prepared to give, listen, I can give you $5 or £5. Okay. So a contribution, you'd be surprised how valuable you are to that town or that city or that region. If you ask your readers what they're interested in and you ask them to contribute towards your business, you'd be surprised how many of them do. That's exactly how Wikipedia does it. That's exactly how The Guardian in the UK does it.
All right, one final question, Chad, and actually it's a pretty good segue from the last question. And now that your focus is transitioning from advertisers to readers, how do you measure the content?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a pretty good point. We're used to kind of looking at things like calling people who visit our websites users. Okay, drop that language. Okay, we're used to looking at things and saying the all-important page view is the metric that matters. If page views goes down, our traffic is going down. That means we're dying as a business. Ignore those metrics. I think if the bravery comes in that. The bravery comes in to the scenario whereby you say, how many readers do we have? And what are those readers doing? If you've got 90% of your readers as anonymous, your first objective is, I need to identify who my readers are. I need to get them to identify themselves coming into my news platform. And how many of those readers come back? How much time do those readers spend on your site? How much content do they consume? These are the things that matter. The engagement metrics are the things that matter. Once you get a handle on the engagement metrics, then you'll be able to say, listen, we can now deploy a reader revenue business model because we understand exactly what our readers are doing. And those are the things that matter. If I said to a publisher now, if I said we could halve your traffic, but double your revenue, and you had a devoted audience going back to your site more than they've ever done before, is that something that you would shape in the future? And nearly all of them would say yes. Is that we no longer are moving towards a pure ad business model, you know, and in all honesty, it's always going to be a losing battle if you're doing that against Meta, Google. Amazon's advertising model is absolutely incredible. You know, there's great big businesses out there doing advertising really, really well. And I'm not going to say that news publishers are going to not do advertising. They'll always do it. However, the focus has to be away from page views and users to readers, return readers, time on site, consumption and engagement of what you're creating on your platform.
All right, Chad, we just had another question pop up, so let's just sneak that one in. And it says, doesn't the New York Times successful digital product contradict what you're saying about news consumption?
In what? Sorry, I don't think it does. I mean, New York Times is famous for visualizing their content. They're famous for mobile first storytelling. They're famous for linear storytelling. They're literally pioneers in all of those things. They are, you know, you see very often New York Times articles being shared, and you see graphics and visuals that are almost unique to the New York Times. You know, so these are the things that pioneer a reader experience. It's not only that's what I'm talking about. I wouldn't advocate local news follows the same path as the New York Times. They've gone down a certain path where they've got their readers in certain funnels. There's some interesting stat. I'll just get it right. It was from the Independent a couple of years ago, and they said anonymous readers consume something like 7 articles a month. Once they're registered or identified, that goes up to like 30 articles a month. Once you're a subscriber, you're consuming over 150 articles a month. So the difference between an anonymous reader and even a registered reader is huge. An anonymous reader and a subscriber is a world of difference. And the New York Times knows this. So their objective is to try and get their readers into a funnel and move them through that funnel to eventually go into this kind of paying framework. Now, they're the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Globe or the Atlantic. You know, I understand that. But for local news providers, you can either deploy one of those models, but I would say the product has to evolve first. Reader-centric publishing, linear storytelling, mobile-first storytelling, visual storytelling. Get those things right, and now you're in a position to say, right, now we've given what our readers want. Let's get close to understanding how we service this community, and then go down the road of either metering, contributions, sections, premium content, whatever it is that you want to do. And I would say, and I would advocate, you've got to test nearly all of them, because some of them will work, some of them won't work.
Well, thank you very much, Chad. I hope everyone enjoyed this and found some value in it. Chad, excuse me, Chad is going to make himself available to any NYPA members. He'd lock in 30 minutes to discuss with you. He's limiting it to 2 weeks. But if you have any questions for him, this would be a wonderful opportunity for you to meet with Chad. If you could, I'll give you my email address. and then I will forward them to Chad if you'd like me to. Just send it to me, jeff@nynewspapers.com. I would also like any feedback you can give us. We're trying to take our conference and expand it a little bit. As everyone knows, we've got some great speakers and we have some great vendors there that have a lot of things to offer. But we want to extend it to more than just a 2-day conference. How can we help you throughout the year? Things change, as you all know, drastically throughout the year. So how can we help you there? Our conference next year is March 20th and 21st. It's once again in Saratoga. So if you want more information on that, you can include that in your email. So we have recorded this, so I will pass it along to you also. Yeah, we can send that along to any of the attendees or all of the attendees in case you're interested. So anything else there, Chad?
No, thanks, Jeff, for inviting me. You know, I like to finish these webinars with an open invite. I can give any publisher for any reason, even just to shoot the breeze about, listen, this is where we are now. We're stuck with this problem, or we've got this challenge. I'm available to you for. I tend to do one a day, or sometimes 2 a day. It's a 30-minute conversation. I'll give you my take on it. I'll give you my perspective on it. It doesn't have to be a tech discussion. It could well just be, listen, we are a publisher and this is what we're facing. Happy to have those calls. I speak to, as I said, pretty much all day, every day, speak to publishers throughout the world, and your problems are the same. Around the world, they're pretty much similar.
Okay, great. Chad, thank you very much. As everyone knows right now, our mission is to deliver content, but to do that, we need revenue. Advertising revenue, unfortunately, is decreasing, so we need to find other ways to fund our mission. So, Chad, thanks again. Appreciate everything, and hopefully we'll see you in March.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see it. Saratoga is a beautiful place. I'd like to go back again.
All right. We got to get you up here during the races, though.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jeff. Speak to you soon.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.